second incident, which I'd like to tell you was from a place, Jamnagar, very, very busy aerodrome, just like Kalaikunda. This was another place, which had air to ground range as well as air to air range. So it was around 1:45 in the afternoon. I was on radar duty. I had just switched off the radar because just last one odd Kiran was about to land. They had come for air to ground range sorties. And then one trainer got airborne, which was from the TAGD, the very, very prestigious organization of the Indian Air Force, which was there at Jamnagar at that time, based there. Thereafter, subsequently, it shifted to Gwalior. So that got airborne, and 6 aircraft formation was just taxiing out. And that is the time weather warning was issued that there is likelihood of a rain thunderstorm. And actually, I was sitting in the tower. I was about to go home, and I looked around, and I was trying to ascertain as to from where is this thunderstorm going to come, because it was very difficult to locate. And then we saw a patch in one direction, northeast direction. From far off, you could see a big patch, building up gradually, but it looked quite far away, maybe easily 25 kilometers away, maybe more. And one trainer was already airborne. And can you imagine, in no time, the trainer got airborne. It went to the sector. It was doing some flying, and the weather approached. And the way it rained that day, you could not see even 1 meter outside from the aerodrome, less than 100 meters visibility, and low clouds and this, that. We got the radar immediately switched on, but it takes time for the radar to come on again. And from there, I straight away was asked to move to radar, and I moved over to radar. And then we got this aircraft. Unfortunately, the precision approach radar didn't behave. And he was a pilot from the TAGD who went on to become the commandant TAGD, and finally thereafter also retired as AOC in C. So this gentleman was the captain. He is also a very close friend of mine, and it got a little more reinforced after that incident. Then I took over that particular aircraft, and he didn't have much fuel. He didn't have fuel even to divert to the nearest base. That was the kind of understanding you can imagine, between pilot and controllers. They heard a voice and then no problem. So they were extending it a bit, they carried out one more situation, and then they were coming back. Thereafter, to take that aircraft and recover him on a radar, where the weather is very, very severe. Flying is not easy in bad weather, especially when you're coming close to the Mother Earth. And I kept advising that aircraft regarding the altitude, because that is not available to you on the radar. It's only the distance and actually, as a matter of fact, just around 3 kilometers from the touchdown point, I had the audacity of declaring that as an emergency approach, though the pilot never said anything. I just said, that I'm declaring it as an emergency approach, and will continue to pass instructions till radar contact is lost. And I continued passing instructions. And thereafter, when radar contact was lost also, maybe about 3/4 of a mile from touchdown point, I told him that radar contact is lost. However, we'll continue on DR. And I gave him a 1-degree turn, also advised 1-degree turn. And I told him, you're over threshold, now over touchdown point. And you're just praying to God, because you're not seeing the aircraft on the radar. And the pilot, though this is not part of the standard transmission, I asked him, confirm runway visual. And there was no reply. You can imagine, that was a hair-raising moment. It was just for a fraction of a second, but it appeared as if decades had passed and nothing was happening. And then immediately thereafter, I heard my friend's voice that landed. You cannot imagine, the perspiration, the entire scenario with me. And guess what, in that kind of a bad weather, his commandant was also there in the tower, monitoring the whole thing, but he did not utter a single word. That is called top professionalism by everybody. And we finished this. I went home, and actually I was to pick up my wife, who used to teach in the Air Force school, but I didn't. My child was also very small in the UKG that time. So they walked in rain all the way to home, because I didn't come there, and there was no mobiles those days. So when I came, she was quite angry with me. What happened, that you didn't come? So I told her, I said, this is what the thing is anyway. Let's have lunch. As we started, this gentleman came in, the pilot, and he hugged me. And then we had a little bit of a chat. In the evening also, we had some drinks. So that was one incident, which is etched in my memory. Very, very challenging, most difficult, but at the same time, very, very satisfying. I can't tell you the goosebumps that it gives. Actually, as a matter of fact, that pilot, in all the occasions, like he was the AOC of Jodhpur also. I had gone there for a pilot controller interactive session, which as DATS, I had taken that initiative. I went to many places. That was one of them. He was the AOC, and though he was not required to speak, but he went to the rostrum and he narrated the whole incident. He narrated the whole incident. And he was telling the pilots, just see, this is the kind of rapport. Yes. And this is the kind of brotherhood, that this is the kind of trust that we have in each other, air traffic controllers and the fighter pilots. And I'm sure, this is the kind of trust they also have with fighter controllers, because Absolutely. These are two elements of the administrative branch which are very, very intrinsic to the flying element. They're totally dependent on these two elements.
Actually, it's a misnomer when you say that, no, it is, no, you are from the ADAM branch, particularly when, we are talking about these substreams, flight controlling and air traffic controlling. So this is, you are right in the thick of operations. It's totally air operations, one cannot imagine without these. But anyway, so, when we are talking about this, those hair-raising moments and those goosebumps and those feeling of, I would say, you really don't know what to expect. A lot of thoughts come to your mind at that point of time, the good, bad, ugly ones. So we have all had these kind of instances. Now, how do you retain your composure? How do you retain your, your senses around you? Because these are very, very difficult times. So under such intense pressure, how does one, control? There is obviously a part of training involved in this. And what else is there, right? What kind of training and what else perhaps helps one to withstand such high intense pressures?
It's very important for every air traffic controller to practice emergencies. It's very, very important. Because as the saying goes, practice makes makes one perfect. So there are some emergencies, which you can practice. So those practices involve aircraft also at times. You can do it behind closed doors also in your own rooms. Because very important aspect of your whole controlling is your attinator, the radio telephony natter. Because when you are speaking, in aviation, there are few words, which are defined separately. They do not match exactly the same meaning, which is given in the dictionary. So if you, mix up your words, or you don't use the correct word at the correct time, it can lead to catastrophe. So it is very important that your radio telephony is correct. So you have to practice that all the time. And regardless of however experienced you may be, you can't let go of that particular aspect. You got to have your attinator in absolutely perfect condition. And you have to practice emergencies. You have to keep looking for such things happening. Actually, the biggest problem with air traffic controlling or even rescue and crash firefighting is, I'll give you an example of rescue crash firefighting. Now, these guys, they keep sitting in the crash tender. That is what the air headquarters order says. And there are guys like me, who have been at the helm, wherever I am there. Those guys are actually sitting in the crash tender, regardless of the weather conditions, sweating it out. And if there is a requirement, they are required to proceed there. It may happen in their entire lifetime. There may not be a single instance. Yes. And it can happen 2 or 3 times in a single day. I remember one case again at Jamnagar, where again from the TACD, a very senior experienced pilot gave way to another aircraft, to land, not realizing that he himself was on very, very short fuel, but showing top class airmanship. he permitted that guy to land. He landed and he came for another circuit. By the time he was coming for another circuit, it was for the other runway 06. He didn't have fuel and he had to eject. And as he ejected, there was a small little hillock kind of a thing that side. So the aircraft hit that and there was a huge ball of fire. I was there in the ATC, of course, not on RT at that time, but I was on the approach channel. This was happening on the aerodrome. So it was very difficult from the tower to make out, whether that guy has landed in the ball of fire, and thereafter also the chute deployed, and then it immediately collapsed. Whether the chute deployed after he hit the ground, or whether the chute had deployed first, he hit the ground, and then the chute collapsed. So it was a very, very touch and go scenario. And can you imagine our rescue crash firefighters? They just rushed to the spot. There was this sergeant. He tried to, because all the boundaries are fenced. So they were fenced, and he tried to jump across because he tried to cut it. In an emergency, your efficiency goes down tremendously. That is what the biggest problem is. So with the same cutter, which he will cut it 99 times of 100, that was the 100th time, one time when he couldn't cut it. So he jumped, lacerating his whole leg, opened up his whole leg. It was all in blood. We could see, he went onto the other side, took the pilot in his lap, gave him the positive strokes. The helicopter landed by then, took him to the MH there local, and he recovered. Actually, thereafter was on crutches for quite some time, but then subsequently he walked also. There was an excellent message from him, which was displayed in the ATC tower, that thanks guys, only because of you that I'm alive today. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been alive. And thanks especially to the sergeant who gave me the positive strokes, to remain alive at that point of time. So this is another example of how a situation can be retrieved with practice and with you are maintaining your cool. So this guy, of course, he took a little extraordinary initiative, but that was very much called for. So even to his own personal discomfort, he saved the life of the pilot. You just imagine, what a big achievement that is.
Right, sir. So I think, all these instances point to certain, qualities, that, of course, when we are selecting officers, speed of decisions, the quickness with which, you are able to decide, take action. I think that's a very important quality, which we do consider. Then your clarity, how clearly and precisely are you able to communicate? Of course, this is a quality, of course, which can be honed over a period of time. And like you said, artinata, right? Saying the right, using the right terminology at the correct time.
Actually, as a matter of fact, when you use artinata correctly, that also enhances your own confidence, many levels.
Absolutely. So I'm sure the training plays a very, very important part in helping you cope with such kind of intense pressure and handling those emergency situations, right? So I'm sure if we start discussing, there will be till the cows come home. We can continue discussing these examples. But yeah, going forward, there are a lot of airports or airfields these days, where they're dual use. The Air Force is using it, and the civil aircrafts also coming into land. Maybe the other way around also must be there, where it's a civil airfield and the Air Force aircrafts are using that. So if you could just mention or explain that a little bit.
So this is another huge challenge for the air traffic controllers, because when you are operating in a pure Air Force environment, things are a little different. Because if you are in a fighter base, all the fighters, by and large, they're operating on the same speed configuration kind of. But when you have a mixed traffic of civil and military, where both are critical, military because of its exercise and because of the requirement to immediately land back, fuel configuration and other things. Whereas for civil, they have to maintain time frame because they're carrying passengers, and they have those passengers are required to take another flight thereafter. So if they are delayed, then that will also will reflect very, very badly on that air traffic services unit. For example, a place like, say, Pune Aerodrome, which is a very, very busy joint user aerodrome, as we call it, joint user aerodrome, where both military and civil aircraft are operating. You have the Su-30s operating, in our times, Su-30, MiG-29, Jaguars, you name it, and also the civil aircraft, the Boeings, the Airbus, they are all operating. And Pune has got specific challenges of altitude, short runway length, and weather. It starts drizzling without any much notice. So all these taken into consideration, this is a huge challenge. So one has to prepare for this, understand, how to deal with a mix of civil and military traffic, because both are important and both have to be given their due. It's not that, you just recover one type of aircraft and forget the other, or just tell him to wait. That is not correct. And that is not the way to handle traffic. So as far as controllers are concerned, young ones, especially if they come from even from a helicopter base to a fighter base, they find it a little difficult, to adjust. It takes time for them to adjust because the speeds have varied, from transport helicopter base to a fighter base. Or if they go to a place, which is a joint user aerodrome. Now, many military aerodromes are being used by civil aircraft, and more Air Force bases are being opened. The concept of flexible use of airspace that is being implemented in India. So airspace is one entity. So everyone can use it depending on whose requirement it is. So it is very important that airspace management, the team which is handling the airspace, is very, very clear as to how they are going to go about this task of allotting the airspace to whichever agency requires it more. And these days, the tactical routing has started taking shape tremendously. Plus, in civil aviation also, they have started shifting from ground-based navigational aid to satellite-based navigational aid, wherein direct routings are possible, and there are so many other complicated things like performance-based navigation and area navigation and so on and so forth that you will come to know, once you join the Indian Air Force, you will come to know better that these are all new challenges which have opened up, and they require you to handle all this traffic in a very, very mature fashion, and for which you have been given the training and you have your seniors to guide you all the time. So you look at most of them as your leader, as your role model, and try and inculcate in yourself these qualities, starting with attinator, and then to maintain a cool head. Ensure, that at no point of time the pilot gets a feeling, that you're not sure. Absolutely. Because that is a very, very bad thing to happen. Because if he loses confidence in you, the whole thing will go for a toss. He is trusting you blindly. You're telling him to turn left 2 degrees. He turns left 2 degrees without seeing as to where he's going. Absolutely. So for that to happen, you got to retain your composure. You've got to retain your confidence. And that can happen only with knowledge and expertise. So which you must build.